Hi, I'm Melvin MacLeod, the editor-in-chief of Lion's Roar magazine. We're joined by evolutionary psychologist Robert Wright, author of the new book, Why Buddhism is True. This book has got as much notice among mainstream press and intellectuals as any book on Buddhism that I can remember. Thank you very much for joining us, Bob.
Well, thanks for having me, Melvin.
You feel that Buddhism accurately describes the problems of the human condition, broadly included in what Buddhism calls the first noble truth of suffering or dukkha, and that its analysis is actually consistent with what we now know about the psychology of evolution.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as I see it, Buddhism makes the claim that there is a lot of suffering in life typically, and that humans often fail to see the world clearly. They have illusions about themselves and about other people and about the world, and that these two things are related. In other words, the failure to see the world clearly is the reason we suffer, and also the reason we cause other people to suffer, the reason, you might say, we misbehave. Um, and I think, broadly speaking, evolutionary psychology does confirm that diagnosis. Certainly, evolutionary theory holds that we are not engineered by natural selection to be happy.
So, evolutionary psychology tells us that while we may have developed certain patterns, psychological patterns, that are advantageous for the survival of our genes or of our species, they are actually not advantageous for our own happiness and well-being as human beings, and they do not necessarily help us to lead a meaningful life. Is that correct? In effect, they're productive from a genetic point of view, but counterproductive from a human point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen that the animal's actual well-being overlaps with, with natural selection's agenda. It's just not guaranteed. And if you want to look at a very common phenomenon, which is just, the evaporation of gratification, you might say. In other words, you see some tempting food or something, you eat it, feels good for a while, but the feeling goes away and you yearn for more. That seems to be built in by natural selection. The fact that the gratification will be fleeting and moreover will lead us kind of yearning for more in a kind of a dissatisfied state. That's a good example of something seems to be a built-in feature. So there is a kind of recurring unsatisfactoriness. And as I'm sure you know, there are scholars who say that, the word that's typically translated as suffering, the ancient Pali term of dukkha, could be translated as kind of unsatisfactoriness, or certainly has that as one of its connotations, and that just makes perfect sense in terms of natural selection.
What is the relationship between Buddhism's diagnosis of, in effect, the individual drive for survival and survival of both the physical self and the sense of self, and the evolutionary drive of the collective survival of the genetic material? Which is the cause and which is the effect, or how do the two drivers of our behavior relate to each other?
Singling out natural selection as the ultimate cause of all this that's not like a rival explanation to Buddhism's explanation, because it's a different kind of explanation. It's an ultimate explanation. It's an explanation about how, why the machinery is set up such that it is, if that makes sense.
What is, in your experience now, the antidote to this evolutionary, this conundrum that evolution has given us? That indeed we survive, but we survive by not being happy.
Evolutionary psychology does not have that answer. Evolutionary psychology is descriptive, but not prescriptive. Buddhism is both. Buddhism not only identifies the problem, it also comes up with something to do about it. I mean, the Buddha did that in his very first sermon after his enlightenment. And part of the path that is said to lead to a solution is meditation, and that's a part that's emphasized, especially I would say in kind of so-called Western Buddhism. And in my experience, it it works. I don't mean that I have been completely liberated from suffering or that I see with perfect clarity. I just think I'm a little less deluded, and I suffer a little less than I did before I started meditating. And moreover, I can see looking ahead that, if I had more time to devote to the practice, everything I've seen suggests to me that if I could do more than my 30 to 45 minutes a day of meditation, and maybe, listen to more Dharma talks while taking walks or something, that I would progress even further. I just think the logic of the Buddhist path makes sense, and Buddhism, agrees with evolutionary psychology on the diagnosis, but unlike evolutionary psychology, actually provides a prescription.